here we are having a podcast. I think, like 20 years ago, people just...
Having a podcast.
Podcasting, doing a podcast, whatever the appropriate verb is. But I think up until like 20 years ago, people just had conversations.
Now we need to monetize them.
So like, how do you account for that? How do you account for the podcast explosion? Why are people so excited about the medium?
Yeah. When I started Pints with Aquinas back in 2016, I think I could name on one hand the amount of Catholic podcasts I knew that were out there. And now there are more podcasts than people, which is great, I guess. I think that one of the reasons people sometimes like to listen to a long-form podcast than, say, an audiobook is they enjoy listening to people think through things. Because if you wanted their crystallized thought, you would presumably listen to the book that they wrote that editors went through. But there's something nice and candid about two people talking and thinking things through and saying things in a clumsy way and trying to arrive at something articulate. Yeah. That's why I like it. It feels more honest.
Is there like, it seems like there's a non-authoritative authority to the guy who is willing to think through a thing, to stumble through a thing, and then to offer his thoughts on it. I mean, like, people seem to be really loyal to the hosts of the podcast that they listen to. Like, how do you account for that when it's them kind of working through what it is that they think?
Yeah, I think most of the success of Pints with Aquinas has to do with guests, because they're the ones really, exploring the things they know a lot about, and I see my job as throwing logs on a fire to keep them going.
Okay, in this image, your guests are what?
They are burning in hell. The hearth. Yeah, good point. It's it's fuel for the intellect.
Ah, yeah, okay. Okay, perfect.
Spiritual fuel.
So here we go. Do you think that podcasts are a good vehicle for evangelization or a workable vehicle for evangelization?
I mean, every 3 months I have a crisis and decide I'm going to quit. And during those times, I tend to get pretty cynical about everything in the world. And the times that I have sort of expressed publicly on my podcast that, hey, you know what, like, just unsubscribe and read a book. Like, you would be much better off. Just drink bourbon with your friend on the porch, just read poetry together. You're in a much better spot. I've said that a couple of times, I think, when I've gone through my little cynical phases. But I've had people kind of like lovingly rebuke me. And they'll say, I actually came to the faith because I was listening to your show, or something like that. And so, if you want to take people at their word, okay, well, that's pretty great. I don't get it, but that's great. And so, yeah. So I do think it can be an avenue for evangelization. Yeah. And I one of the first things I did after starting Pints was I wrote to over 200 convents around the world and begged their prayers. And I think that podcasts can be funny, they can be emotional, they can be moving, they can be interesting, but sitcoms can be those things, and they don't convert hearts. So I truly try to say, Lord Jesus Christ, like, use this stuff as even the bad stuff, use that as manure for the growth of others, and just try to entrust it to Him.
Yeah. Okay, so in your podcast, the conceit is that the conversation partner is St. Thomas Aquinas. Obviously, they have conversations with a lot of people, but it's Pints with Aquinas. So what do you think? I mean, this is like, I'm asking about my older brother. It's like, what do you think about St. Thomas Aquinas?
Yeah.
But what makes St. Thomas a good conversation partner? Why not like Pints with Dostoevsky?
Well, it may as well be at this point, because... I mean, when I started Pints with Aquinas, it was to get more credit for my master's degree. And I actually released like 10 before even advertising it, because I had a job at the time and I didn't know if I should be doing this or not. And then what would happen is I would go to my job, I'd go to these shows, where we would have booths at different events, and people would come up and they'd only want to talk about Pints with Aquinas. So that was interesting. But back then I would just take an article and then reflect on it. But obviously we don't do that anymore. So it kind of evolved. Much to the chagrin of many. But I now tend to do that idea more on my locals account, where we do these morning laid-back kind of, we call it morning coffee podcasts, where we'll look at an article or we'll look at something Thomas says or some other saint says. But I don't know, I guess, so I had Pints with Aquinas, and then I had the Fradd show brilliantly named. And then I decided, well, you know, like Aquinas, this is getting too hard to have two brands here. And in my interviews, I often talk about philosophy and theology and even Aquinas. So, you know what, I'll just call the whole thing Pints with Aquinas. So what do I think of Aquinas? I've said before that whereas Augustine is beautiful like a garden, Thomas is beautiful like a game board instruction manual. And there is real beauty to that. Not a word is wasted. What you don't want in an instruction manual for a board game is ambiguity, like how you feel, any of that. I want to know exactly what it is I need to know. And when you read Aquinas, that's what you get. He says in one page what modern writers can say in maybe a book. And so I really like that. I like how clear he is. I enjoy reading him for fun. He covers almost every topic imaginable, even ones that I wouldn't even say like publicly because they're quite sensitive,
right?
You know. But
I like the board game image too, because usually when you open up a board game, there's like 4 or 6 of you gathered around, and one person says he remembers, but he doesn't quite remember, and another guy thinks that he can like infer the rest of the rules on the basis of what he knows about the gaming world writ large. And then there's that like kind of strong silent type who's in the corner, you know, with the instructions, methodically reading for 12 minutes.
Interesting.
And in the course of those 12 minutes, when the 5 other persons have not come to a conclusion, he's actually gotten the wisdom. And then he comes in and makes a strong respondio decendum quod. And then from that point on, you know the game that you're playing.
Hey, thank you so much for watching. Before you go, do us a favor, leave a comment, let us know what you thought of the video, like, and subscribe.